She fired the gun before I could even breathe. The deafening blast ripped through the quiet suburban street as my 14-year-old daughter, Lila, collapsed on the pavement, her bright yellow backpack hitting the concrete seconds before her body did. I saw her eyes widen in shock, her small fingers reaching toward me, but her voice never came. HOA Karen stood there frozen, both hands trembling around the smoking pistol, as if she couldn't believe what she'd done. My world collapsed in that single heartbeat. Neighbors screamed, people ducked behind cars, and everything inside me turned to fire. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know the uniform hanging inside my truck. She didn't know she had just shot the daughter of the police chief. But she was about to find out, because the moment Lila's blood touched my hands, something inside me snapped forever. Before this story begins, I want to speak directly to you, the amazing people watching this. Tell me, which city are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments right now. I love seeing how far this community stretches across the entire country. Each one of you matters. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button before we dive in, because today's story isn't just emotional, it's infuriating. It's the kind of story that makes your heart break and your blood boil at the same time, because what happened to my daughter shouldn't have happened to anyone. Not in a neighborhood like ours, not in a country like ours, not ever. It all started on a warm Saturday morning when Lila stepped out to walk to her friend's house 3 doors down. She had no idea that HOA Karen had been having one of her episodes, ranting about property rules and noise violations that didn't exist. My daughter, sweet, quiet, artistic, became the target of a woman who saw threats where there were none. And as we peel back every layer of this story, you'll see how one split-second decision turned an entire community upside down, exposed buried secrets, and pushed me, her father, a police chief, to the breaking point. What happened next was something none of us were prepared for. I still remember the exact sound her laughter made just seconds before the gunshot. It was light and quick, like little bubbles popping in the air as Lila jogged ahead of me on the sidewalk, her yellow backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her curls catching the morning sun. I had just stepped out of the truck, still on my phone with the deputy about a minor traffic incident across town, when I saw her pause at the edge of the HOA walkway, right in front of Karen's house. "Daddy, look, the chalk drawings are still here," she called out, pointing at the pastel hearts and flowers she'd drawn the evening before at the end of the cul-de-sac. I opened my mouth to remind her to stay close when I heard the screech of a door slamming open so hard it rattled the glass. HOA Karen stormed out onto her porch, bathrobe untied over a floral nightgown, hair frizzed, eyes wild like she hadn't slept all night. "You!" she shrieked, fingers stabbing the air toward my daughter. "I told you no more drawing on community property. This isn't your personal playground." Lila startled and took a tiny step back, her sneakers scraping on the concrete. I'm sorry, ma'am," she stammered, her voice small but polite, the way her mother had taught her. "It's just chalk. It washes away with the rain." I was already halfway across the lawn, phone forgotten in my hand, my mind automatically shifting into that calm, measured tone I'd used 1,000 times as a cop. "Ma'am, it's all right," I called out, trying to defuse before it escalated. "She's just a kid. I'll make sure it gets washed off today." But Karen wasn't listening. Not to me, not to reason, not to anything but whatever storm was raging in her head. "I filed a complaint," she screamed, stomping down the stairs, her slippers slapping against the steps. "You people think the rules don't apply to you just because you smile and play innocent. I've had enough of the noise, the mess, Her eyes flickered over me for a split second, and I could see the recognition there, somewhere under the anger. She knew who I was. Chief of police, the man who'd spoken at last month's HOA safety meeting, the one who'd rallied for better street lighting and neighborhood patrols. But the thing about people like Karen is, once they start spiraling, even reality has trouble catching up to them. "Back up, sweetheart," I said gently to Lila, my voice low, steady, the same tone I'd used talking to scared victims at crime scenes. "Come stand next to me." She tried. She took one step, then another, eyes locked on Karen, who was now digging into the oversized pocket of her robe with frantic, jerky movements. I felt something cold slither into my spine. I'd seen that motion before, too many times, in too many alleyways, during too many traffic stops gone sideways. Karen, I said, this time using the full weight of my command voice, the one that had stopped grown men in their tracks. Whatever you're reaching for, don't. Walk back inside. We can talk about this. But she wasn't listening. Her face twisted, a mixture of fear and fury. You people never listen to me, she shouted, and then suddenly, her hand came out of the pocket, clutching a small black handgun, the barrel trembling as badly as her fingers. My heart went silent. The world slowed down into that strange, terrible tunnel of focus I knew all too well from officers' testimonies after shooting. Her hand jerked, the muzzle swinging between us, and for a terrifying second, it pointed at my chest. I raised both hands instinctively, stepping slightly to the side, trying to put myself between her and my daughter. Karen, put the gun down. I ordered, my voice low but sharp, no longer neighborly, no longer soft. You don't want to do this. You point that weapon at my child, and you are committing a felony. Put it down. Neighbors were starting to peek through curtains, doors cracked open. Phones raised, but no one stepping in. That's the thing about suburbs. Everyone watches, but no one moves. Lila's hand brushed against the back of my jacket, her fingers clutching fabric like she was trying to anchor herself to me, and I could feel how hard she was shaking. Dad, she whispered, barely audible. I'm scared. That was the moment I felt the thin line between cop and father start to snap. I shifted my weight, trying to angle us toward the truck where my duty weapon and radio lay locked inside. I was off duty. I wasn't wearing a vest. I had no backup. But none of that mattered because my child was standing in the open and a frightened, irrational woman was holding a gun with her finger twitching too close to the trigger. You don't follow the rules, Karen ranted, the gun now swinging back toward Lila as if drawn to the smallest, most vulnerable thing in front of her. You bring down this neighborhood with your chaos and your noise and your trash on the sidewalks and it's chalk, my daughter whispered, tears filling her eyes. It's just chalk. Put the gun down. I barked, every ounce of authority I had compressed into those 4 words. Somewhere behind me, I heard a car door slam, someone shouting, I'm calling 911. Another voice yelled, Karen, stop, what are you doing? But Karen's eyes were glassy, unfocused, like she wasn't seeing us. Not really. She was seeing some world where she was the beleaguered hero, the only one protecting her perfect neighborhood. Her hand jerked again. I saw the exact second her finger tightened. I lunged forward, trying to shove my daughter out of the line of fire, but in that split heartbeat, the shot went off. The sound ripped through the morning like the sky, tearing open. Lila's body flinched, her shoulder jerking backward violently as the impact knocked her sideways. Her backpack slipped off, hitting the sidewalk with a dull, soft thud that somehow sounded louder than the gunshot itself. For a moment, I didn't hear anything, not the screams, not the birds, not even my own voice as I shouted her name. All I could see was her small frame crumpling to the ground, her hands instinctively clutching at her upper chest and shoulder, her face twisted in confused shock instead of pain, like she couldn't quite understand what had just happened. Time snapped back, and everything rushed in at once. Neighbors yelling, someone crying, a dog barking frantically behind a fence. I dropped to my knees beside her, my hands hovering, shaking, torn between my training and my terror. I saw a spreading stain on her shirt, saw her lips trembling as she tried to breathe through the panic. Lila, hey, look at me, I said, my voice breaking in a way it never had on duty, not once in 20 years. Stay with me, baby. You're okay. You're okay. I've got you. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and wet. Daddy, it hurts, she whispered, her voice thin like it was fighting its way through a tunnel. I pressed my hand against the wound to control the bleeding, my brain flipping through every first aid protocol I'd ever learned while my heart screamed that this was my little girl, not some stranger on a call. Don't you close your eyes. I ordered softly, leaning close so she could see nothing but my face. You keep looking at me, all right? I am right here. I am not going anywhere. Behind me, I heard Karen drop the gun. It clattered against the concrete, rolling down one step and settling there like some evil thing that had no business in the morning light. She stumbled backward, hands flying to her mouth, her voice cracking into a high-pitched, horrified wail. I didn't mean she scared me, I thought. Oh my God, I thought she was going to. Her words dissolve into sobs. Someone grabbed her arm, another neighbor kicking the gun away from reach, yelling for everyone to stay back. 911 is on the way. A woman shouted from somewhere to my left. They're coming, they're coming. I didn't answer. I didn't look up. Everything I had ever been, narrowed down to the fragile, shaking form of my daughter lying on the street she'd walked 1,000 times. I could feel the warm, terrifyingly real wetness against my palm as I held pressure, my mind tracking her breathing, her eyelids the color of her lips. It hit me then, sharp and cold and final. This wasn't a crime scene I was responding to. This wasn't another call, another report, another statistic. This was my child, my blood, and the woman who had pulled the trigger had done it in front of half the neighborhood, with no idea she had just shot the daughter of the man who ran this town's entire police department. And as the sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder with every passing second, a part of me, the cop, the lawman, started calculating everything that would come next. But the father in me, the one holding his little girl together on the pavement, knew one thing with absolute clarity. Nothing in this neighborhood, nothing in this community, and nothing in my life would ever be the same again. The ambulance tore into the cul-de-sac like a storm of flashing red and blue, the wailing siren vibrating through my bones as paramedics sprinted toward us, kneeling beside Lila with movements so fast and precise they blurred. But even with their efficiency, their calm commands, and their hands moving with practiced confidence, I could see the quick glances they exchanged, those tiny, silent looks that only professionals working life and death scenes recognize in each other, the kind that said, "This is bad, this is a child, this is personal." They gently moved me aside, even though they knew exactly who I was calling me chief, in hushed tones as they cut through Lila's shirt to assess the wound, stabilizing her shoulder, hooking her to oxygen, checking her pulse and pupils, placing pressure pads where my shaking hand had been. I hovered close, completely useless for the first time in my career, unable to do anything except whisper her name over and over, as if it might tether her to consciousness. "We've got her," one paramedic assured me, his voice steady but his jaw tight. "Her vitals are low, but responsive. We need to move now." They lifted her onto the stretcher, the wheels clattering as they rushed her toward the back of the ambulance. I followed, automatically stepping into the vehicle until a medic gently touched my arm. "Chief, you can't ride with us. We need space to work." Those words hit harder than Karen's bullet. But I nodded. There was no arguing when your own training told you the same thing, so I stepped back, heart splintering as the doors slammed shut. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle pulled away, leaving me standing in the center of the street with blood on my shirt and my daughter's cries still echoing in my ears. And then, like a dam breaking, my officers arrived. Patrol cars screeched in from every direction, tires burning rubber, officers jumping out, hands on holsters, scanning the area. They froze when they saw me. My uniform absent, but my authority impossible to miss, my face streaked with the raw, unfiltered terror of a parent. "Chief, what happened?" Officer Ramirez asked, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I didn't answer him. I didn't have the words. Instead, I turned slowly toward where Karen was standing, now surrounded by a cluster of neighbors, some yelling at her, some staring in disbelief, some recording everything on their phones. Her robe was half open, her feet bare, her face streaked with tears and smeared mascara as she backed against her porch railing like a trapped animal. "I didn't mean to," she cried, reaching her hands out helplessly toward me. She startled me. I thought she was, I didn't know what I was doing. Her voice cracked into a sob, but I didn't feel 1 ounce of sympathy. Not when my daughter was fighting for her life miles away because of this woman's delusions. "Put your hands on your head, Karen," Officer Ramirez ordered sharply, stepping forward with 2 others. "You're under arrest." "For what?" she shrieked, shaking her head wildly. "IT was an accident. You can't arrest me for an accident. Reckless endangerment with a firearm, Ramirez snapped. Aggravated assault. Possible attempted murder, depending on the victim's condition. The last line made her collapse into a heaving sob, but the officers didn't hesitate. They took her wrists, cuffed her, and read her rights while neighbors gasped or whispered or filmed. She kept glancing at me, desperate, pleading as if expecting me to intervene and protect her. Maybe because she didn't yet understand the gravity of what she'd done. Maybe because she still believed the rules didn't apply to her the way she'd always believed as the queen of HOA complaints. But I just stared at her, my jaw clenched so tight, I felt something pop in my ear. I said nothing. I walked away, heading toward my truck, as another officer approached me quickly. Chief, per protocol, we need your statement. Not now, I said, not loud but packed with warning. My daughter was just shot. I'm going to the hospital. The officer nodded, stepping aside, but as I reached for the door handle, an elderly neighbor named Mr. Hawkins hurried over, leaning heavily on his cane. Chief, he said breathlessly, I saw everything. Karen, she's been unraveling for weeks. Filing false reports, threatening kids, yelling at parents. You should know. She told the HOA last month she felt unsafe and that she was considering getting a weapon to protect herself from the neighborhood children. My blood went cold. She what? Yes, he whispered, and the HOA ignored it. They brushed it off. They said she was dramatic, not dangerous. Dramatic, not dangerous. My daughter was in an ambulance right now because no one took that seriously. I thanked him, climbed into my truck, and slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. As I sped toward the hospital, every red light felt like a personal attack, every car too slow in the lane felt like an insult, and every second ticking by was a threat, dragging Lila further away from safety. My mind replayed the shooting over and over, each time with new details, new angles, new possibilities. Was the bullet clean? Did it hit an artery? Did it fracture bone? Was she losing too much blood? Had she stopped breathing when the ambulance turned the corner? By the time I arrived, the hospital staff had already rushed her into emergency care. They wouldn't let me through the second set of double doors, even when I identified myself. We're doing everything we can, Chief, the nurse repeated as I paced a groove into the floor. Her trauma surgeon is excellent. I must have paced for 20 minutes when my wife burst through the doors, hair messy, panic written across her face. Where is she? She cried, grabbing my shirt with both hands. Is she alive? What happened? I pulled her into my chest, feeling her sobs shake through both of us, and whispered, She's fighting. Our girl is fighting. When we finally sat down, the waiting room fell into a terrifying quiet, and as I stared at those sterile white doors Lila had disappeared behind, one truth burned hotter than anything else. This wasn't over. Not even close. Because when the world finds out that HOA, Karen shot the daughter of the police chief, the entire town is going to explode. The news of the shooting spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire, turning Whispering Pines from a quiet suburban community into the center of a storm everyone felt, but no one could control. By the time the sun began to shift toward late afternoon, the hospital waiting room was packed with familiar faces, neighbors pacing, whispering, crying, arguing, everyone replaying what they'd seen or heard in the cul-de-sac, as if reliving it might somehow change the outcome. Some stood with coffee cups shaking in their hands, others clutched tissues like lifelines, and a few were openly furious, voices trembling with outrage. She's been unhinged for months, Mrs. Peterson muttered loudly, her arms crossed so tight her knuckles whitened. I told all of you, told the HOA board, she was dangerous. But, oh no, I was exaggerating. Look where that got us. Other neighbors nodded, some refusing to meet my eyes, some giving me sympathetic looks that were equal parts pity and horror. The HOA vice president, a tall man named Brian who always smelled faintly of cologne and guilt, approached with hands raised timidly, as if coming close to me might make him responsible for the bullet in my daughter's shoulder. Chief, he said, quietly, I just want to say we're all in shock. None of us expected. I cut him off with a look that made him swallow hard. didn't you?" I asked, voice low but ice cold. Mr. Hawkins told me what Karen said at the last meeting, that she felt unsafe, that she was thinking of buying a weapon to protect herself from the neighborhood kids. Brian's face drained of color. "Chief, we thought she was just being dramatic. She filed 26 complaints in the last 3 months over bicycles, sprinklers, trash bins. She complains about everything. How are we supposed to know she would? Because it's your job to know." I snapped. "And you ignored the signs." My wife tightened her grip on my hand, gently pulling me back down before I said something I would regret later. "Sit," she whispered, her voice shaking. "We need to save our strength for Lila." I sat, but the fury continued to simmer like boiling water just below the lid. Phones kept buzzing around the room with updates, texts, rumors. The story had already leaked onto local social media pages, posts with sensational headlines like "Neighborhood Horror," "HOA member shoots child," and "Deranged homeowner attacks police chief's daughter." Comments flooded in, hundreds of them. People debating, accusing, speculating. Some were outraged. Some blamed the HOA. Some blamed Karen's mental instability. Some blamed gun owners. And some, those heartless few, had the audacity to ask what Lila had done wrong to provoke the situation. Those were the comments that made my wife break down again, burying her face in my shoulder as I rubbed her back, reminding myself that people online say cruel things when they're removed from consequences. Meanwhile, outside the hospital, local news vans had begun lining up along the sidewalk, reporters adjusting microphones and powdering their faces while cameramen set up tripods. Officers blocked the doors to prevent them from barging into the waiting room, but I knew it was only a matter of time before the story exploded statewide, and then nationally. A child shot by a neighbor, a delusional HOA member. And the father? The town's police chief. It was the kind of headline that would spin out of control within hours. Inside, the tension thickened as more neighbors trickled in. Some cried when they saw me. Others avoided my gaze, guilt weighing on them like bricks. A mother named Julia approached with her teenage son, who looked pale and shaken. "Chief, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "My son told me Karen chased him last week for riding his skateboard past her driveway. She screamed at him that she'd get rid of all the troublemakers. I should have told you. I'm so sorry." Her son nodded, voice barely above a whisper, as he added, "She followed me all the way down the street. I thought she was going to hit me." More parents chimed in, stories of threats, confrontations, strange behavior. "She once pounded on my door at midnight because I left my porch light on too long. She threatened to sue my daughter for walking her dog on the wrong side of the sidewalk. She told my husband she was keeping a list of all the kids who disrupted the peace." One after another, stories poured out, each one a red flag no one had acted on, and with every confession, every whispered fear, every regret-filled statement, the truth twisted deeper into everyone's chest. Karen hadn't suddenly snapped today. She had been unraveling for months. They all saw it. They all ignored it. And now, a 14-year-old girl was paying the price. Then came a moment the room collectively held its breath, the hospital doors opened, and 2 uniformed officers escorted someone inside. Karen's husband, a thin, exhausted-looking man with graying hair, tear-stained cheeks, and shaking hands. He approached me slowly, almost cautiously, as if he wasn't sure whether I'd stand up or knock him through a wall. "Chief," he whispered, voice breaking, I don't know what to say. I tried to get her help. I begged her to see a therapist. She refused. She said the neighborhood was plotting against her." His voice fell to a whisper. "I should have done more." He sank into a chair, face in his hands, sobbing, not defending her, not excusing her, just drowning in the guilt of someone who watched madness grow inside his home and couldn't stop it. The room softened for a moment, not in forgiveness, but in tragedy, because it wasn't just one person who failed. It was an entire community. The HOA, the neighbors, the family, the system. Everyone saw something wrong. No one truly acted. Then the door swung open again, not the trauma bay doors, but the main waiting room entrance, and the HOA president marched in, tie crooked, face flushed from rushing. He walked straight toward me, clearing his throat. "Chief, on behalf of the Homeowners Association, we want to extend our deepest apologies." Stop talking," I said without even looking up. The room fell silent. "You ignored warnings. You dismissed complaints. You let an unstable woman terrorize this place. And now my daughter is in there fighting for her life. Don't you dare offer me an apology like it makes any of this go away." Every HOA board member in the room shrank back, their authority dissolving like tissue paper in water. A moment later, a nurse stepped out from the double doors. Everyone froze, staring at her like she was a messenger from another world. "Family of Lila?" she asked gently. My wife and I stood so fast our chairs toppled behind us. The nurse gave a soft, tired smile. "She's stable for now. She's asking for you." My wife burst into relieved sobs, gripping my arm as the nurse continued. "She's still weak. She needs rest. But she's conscious." A wave of relief crashed through the room. Neighbors wiped their eyes, hugged each other, whispered, "Thank God." But even with that relief, a second wave followed, almost immediately, darker, sharper, more complicated. Because now that Lila was alive, there would be consequences. Serious consequences. Legal consequences. Community consequences. And as I took my wife's trembling hand and followed the nurse through the double doors, I felt the eyes of the entire neighborhood on my back, fearful, guilty, and bracing for what I would do next. When I stepped into Lila's hospital room for the first time since the shooting, the breath left my lungs all over again. She looked impossibly small against the stark white sheets, her curls swept to one side, a thick bandage across her shoulder, and 4-line taped gently to her arm, monitors blinking beside her like quiet guardians, and for a moment the police chief in me vanished, leaving nothing but a father who wanted to gather her up and never let go. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard my wife sobbing softly beside her, and she offered the faintest smile. Weak, but real. "Dad, I'm okay," she whispered, though the strain in her voice said otherwise. I brushed her hair back, pressing my forehead gently to hers, trying to breathe again, trying to feel something other than the fury that had been coiling tighter inside me with every passing hour. But the peace in that room lasted only a moment before the real world came crashing back in. 2 detectives from my own department, Jacobs and Morales, stood outside the glass window, waiting for me not as colleagues seeking guidance, but as investigators about to question the father of a victim. I gave my wife one last reassuring look, kissed Lila's forehead, and stepped into the hallway, where Jacobs handed me a clipboard. "Chief," he said carefully, "we need your official statement now. And Internal Affairs wants you temporarily off duty while the investigation proceeds. Standard protocol." I nodded, cold, automatic. I knew the rules. I wrote half of them. Take whatever you need. They exchanged cautious glances. Morales cleared her throat. "We have multiple eyewitness videos," she said. "Neighbors recorded everything from the moment Karen came out of her house to the shooting itself. We're reviewing them all." Jacobs added, "We also executed a search warrant on her house." He hesitated. "Chief, you need to hear this." He opened a manila folder and slid photographs into my hands. My stomach twisted. Inside Karen's home, scattered across her living room, were piles of printed reports, papers covered in frantic handwritten notes, circles, red underlines, arrows connecting children's names to paranoid accusations. My daughter's name was everywhere, circled, highlighted, accused of trespassing, property vandalism, intentional disruption, targeted harassment. All insane, all imagined. She kept a binder, Morales said softly, one she called neighborhood threats. Your daughter, she was listed as the top threat. For a moment, I couldn't speak, couldn't think. She also had letters, Jacobs continued, drafted to the county, the school board, the sheriff's office. None were sent, but they show a pattern of escalating paranoia. And the gun? I asked, voice low. Registered? Yes, Morales answered. But the purchase was recent, less than 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. 3 weeks that could have changed everything if someone had paid attention. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. What's Karen saying? Jacobs shook his head. She's claiming she acted in self-defense. Says Lila charged at her, which every video contradicts. She also said she thought your daughter had a weapon. Morales scoffed. It was a piece of chalk. Rage surged through me, not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, surgical kind that burrows deep and grows sharper with every detail. Where is she now? In county. Under protective watch, Morales added. Because, Chief, the neighborhood is angry. Really angry. People were shouting at the station. Her husband left his house because people were gathering outside. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just a legal crisis, it was a community imploding under the weight of its own negligence. What about the HOA? I asked, cooperating. Jacobs made a face. Barely. They're lawyering up. They're afraid of liability. They deleted a bunch of emails this morning, but IT recovered everything. 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 He handed me another set of documents, emails from board members joking about Karen's behavior, ignoring warnings, dismissing complaints, even mocking neighbors who said she was unstable. One email stood out. Karen's a pain, but harmless. Let her blow steam. Harmless. My daughter nearly bled out on the sidewalk because they believe that. I pressed my thumb against the bridge of my nose, fighting the urge to punch through the wall. Morales stepped a little closer. Chief, this goes deeper. We found security cam footage from the Petersons across the street. It shows Karen practicing drawing her gun in her yard late at night. She was preparing for something. Her mind was already gone. A twisting nausea rolled through me. She planned this. She was spiraling, Morales said. Whether she planned a specific target, we don't know yet. But she was preparing for confrontation. Suddenly, a sound split through the hallway, the sharp crack of raised voices. I turned to see two neighbors arguing with a reporter who had slipped past security. The HOA covered it up, one shouted. Karen has been a ticking time bomb. The reporter shoved a microphone toward them. I stepped in fast. You're trespassing on private hospital property, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. Leave now, or I will have you removed. The reporter froze, eyes widening slightly. Chief, the public deserves. The public will get an official statement. I snapped. Not a circus. Security escorted the reporter out while more neighbors poured into the hallway. Some crying, some shaking, some begging to know if Lila was awake, some asking what they could do. And then came the question that hung over all of them like a storm cloud. Chief, what's going to happen now? I looked at them, at the mothers comforting their kids, at the fathers who couldn't hide their anger, at the families terrified their quiet neighborhood had become a battleground, and I felt the weight of responsibility settle over me with crushing force. An investigation, I said firmly. Full and thorough. Every video, every statement, every HOA file, every ignored warning, every complaint, all of it comes out now. Will she be charged with attempted murder? A man asked. If the evidence supports it, I said, and right now it does. A hush fell. My chest tightened. But this isn't just about Karen, I continued. This is about everyone who saw her unraveling and did nothing. The HOA, the neighbors who stayed silent, everyone who looked the other way until it was too late. Their faces flickered with guilt, fear, shame, and they should have, because Lila wasn't just a victim. She was the result of a community's failure. Just then, the hospital intercom buzzed softly, and a nurse stepped toward us. Chief, she said gently, your daughter is asking for you again. My anger softened instantly. I nodded, stepping back into the room. The world quieting the moment, I saw Lila's eyes brighten at my presence. I took her hand, whispering, I'm here. But even as I sat beside her, the investigation was already unfolding in my mind like a storm map, evidence, motives, negligence, legal ramifications, and deep inside, a shadow of something darker stirred. Justice wouldn't be enough. Not this time. The next morning, just as the first rays of sunlight seeped through the blinds of Lila's hospital room, casting soft golden lines across her pale face, the quiet hum of machines was broken by the buzz of my phone, a message from Morales marked urgent. My heart tightened as I stepped into the hallway to read it. Chief, you need to come to the station right now. We found something you need to see. It changes everything. A surge of dread rushed through me. The last thing I needed was another piece of this nightmare unraveling, but instincts honed over decades told me this wasn't something I could delay. I kissed Lila's forehead, whispered I'd be right back, and rushed out of the hospital. When I arrived at the station, Morales and Jacobs were waiting for me in the briefing room, a large TV screen frozen on a pause video frame. Chief, Morales said softly, brace yourself. She hit play. The footage, restored from a corrupted home security drive recovered from Karen's house, showed Karen pacing in her living room days before the shooting. Her hair was tangled, her robe slipping off one shoulder, dark circles under her eyes. She was muttering to herself, words slurred with paranoia, papers clutched in her trembling hands. They're coming for me. The children are spies. They're watching, they're following the patterns. She slammed her hands on the table. She's the worst one. The little one with the curls. She's their leader. I know it. I know it. My jaw locked. My blood ran cold. She was talking about my daughter, I whispered. Morales nodded grimly. There's more. She clicked another file. This time, Karen was sitting at her computer, typing a long, rambling email draft addressed to the HOA board. But it was the subject line that made my breath hitch. Urgent, the chief's daughter is targeting me. Karen's voice trembled as she typed aloud. She walks past my house every day. She draws symbols. She signals to the other kids. She stands too close to my property. She's watching me. She's plotting. They all are. The delusion was complete. Total. Consuming. But the real twist, the one that set my pulse pounding, came when Jacobs handed me a folder marked confidential. Beyond the folder was a second screen with another recovered video. This one was hidden in her basement. Jacob said, his voice tense. It was recorded the night before the shooting. The video flickered on. Karen sat in a small basement corner, surrounded by boxes and dim light, whispering into her phone camera. They think I don't know, she said, eyes darting around. But I know everything. I know about the chief. I know about the girl. They're trying to trick me. They want to get rid of me. She pointed a shaking finger at the lens. If she comes near my house tomorrow, I'll defend myself. I have the right. I have to protect this neighborhood. No one else will do it. Not the HOA. Not the police. Me. My stomach dropped. She planned it. I breathed. Morales swallowed. Yes, Chief. The entire act wasn't spontaneous. It was premeditated. She didn't shoot your daughter out of sudden panic. She was waiting for her. The world tilted on its axis. This wasn't a case of negligence anymore. This wasn't just mental instability, spiraling unchecked. This was attempted murder with intent. Cold, delusional, purposeful. But the nightmare deepened when Jacobs added, and there's a second person involved. I stared at him. What? Morales clicked to the next file, an audio recording. A man's voice filled the room. Low, firm, familiar enough to send a chill down my spine. You do what you have to do, Karen. If the chief thinks he runs this neighborhood, he's wrong. We need order. Real order. Who is that? I demanded. Jacobs turned pale. We ran voice recognition. Twice, Morales took a breath. Chief, it's HOA President Roger Whitmore. For a moment, I genuinely thought I misheard. Roger? The same man who'd walked into the hospital pretending to care? The same man who'd brushed off every warning? The same man who told Karen she was harmless? Morales continued, we searched his HOA office, found deleted emails, encrypted messages to Karen, even a memo draft titled Restoring Order to the Community. He encouraged her behavior, fed her paranoia, and based on the timeline, he might have pushed her toward buying the gun. Rage like I had never known surged through me, hot, fierce, almost blinding. So, he used her, I growled, manipulated a mentally unstable woman to enforce his twisted idea of HOA control. Jacobs nodded. Exactly. Morales added, we believe he never intended for her to shoot anyone, but he knew she was spiraling and chose to weaponize it instead of helping her, which makes him complicit. In a big way. My hands curled into fists. Roger Whitmore hadn't just ignored red flags. He'd poured gasoline on them. He had let a mentally unstable woman believe children were plotting against her. He had nurtured her delusions. And when she pulled the trigger on my daughter, he had pretended to be shocked. Morales placed a small item on the table, a USB drive. There's more. Multiple recordings. Messages. Plans. Plans. Yes, plans to discipline families who didn't follow HOA rules. Your family was at the top of his list. My pulse hammered, because I questioned his policies at HOA meetings. Yes. Morales folded her arms. Chief, I'm sorry, but this is bigger than the shooting. This is a conspiracy. The words punched the air out of me. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was betrayal. From the people sworn to uphold peace in the neighborhood. From a system meant to protect families. From a man who had smiled in my face and shook my hand at block parties. I inhaled sharply. Arrest him. Morales nodded. Already done. He's in holding. My voice dropped to a dangerous calm. Charge him with conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, coercion, destruction of evidence, and anything else that sticks. Jacobs added, Chief, when word gets out, the town will lose its mind. Good, I said coldly. They should have known what was rotting under their noses. But the biggest twist came when Morales said, quietly, Chief, we learned one more thing. I braced myself. What now? She hesitated. Roger and Karen weren't acting alone. There's someone else involved. My blood froze. Who? Morales met my eyes. Someone inside the HOA board. The revelation that a second HOA board member was involved hit me harder than any blow I'd taken in my 20 years wearing a badge. It wasn't just one corrupt leader or one unstable neighbor. This was a coordinated rot inside an organization meant to protect the neighborhood, and knowing that made every step back to the station feel heavier, like I was walking through mud thick with betrayal. Morales handed me another file, this one labeled with a name that made my stomach clench, Sarah Donnelly. Sarah, the HOA secretary, the woman who baked cookies for newcomers, the friendly face who welcomed families during move-ins, the neighbor everyone trusted with their spare key. She was the last person anyone would suspect, which, in hindsight, made her the perfect accomplice. Chief, Morales said softly, sliding printouts across the table, we found deleted text conversations between her and Roger. My eyes scanned the messages, phrases like, Karen needs a push, we can't let the chief override HOA rules, use her, just not too far. And the most disturbing one, if something happens, we'll say she acted alone. Fury curled in my gut, sharp and poisonous. Where is she now? In custody, Morales replied, her voice tight. She broke down when we confronted her. Said she didn't mean for things to go this far. That she just wanted to restore discipline in the neighborhood. Discipline. That word again. The word Roger had used, the word Karen had scribbled all over her paranoid notes. It was their twisted motto. Their justification for turning a quiet suburb into a boiling pot of control, fear, and manipulation. Transfer them both to county. I ordered separate cells. No communication. Jacobs nodded and walked off, and I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. But the storm inside me wasn't calming, it was intensifying. I left the station and returned to the hospital, where my wife sat beside Lila, holding her hand, tears drying on her cheeks. Lila looked stronger, though still pale, her voice faint but clearer than before. Dad, she whispered as I sat at her bedside. Why did she do it? The question shattered me. I'd answered thousands of questions in my career, but none as painful as this one. Because she wasn't well, I said, brushing her curls gently. She was sick in her mind, and some people made her worse. Lila's lips trembled. Did I do something wrong? No, I said instantly, my voice thick. You did nothing wrong. You're the bravest kid I know. She squeezed my hand weakly, and I felt something in my chest split open, not with rage this time, but with fierce, unbreakable love. You're safe now, I whispered. I promise. Hours passed, and eventually she drifted to sleep. My wife stepped into the hallway with me, leaning into my arms as exhaustion weighed her down. "It won't ever be the same," she murmured. "The neighborhood, Lila's trust, I know," I whispered into her hair. "But it will be safer." The next morning, we returned home, not because we wanted to, but because the community demanded it. Cars filled the cul-de-sac, neighbors standing in clusters, waiting for us. When they saw us step out of the vehicle, the crowd parted like water around a stone. Some people cried, some apologized, some simply bowed their heads. And then Mr. Hawkins, cane in hand, approached slowly. "Chief," he said, voice shaking, "we failed you. We failed your daughter. We failed this neighborhood." "Yes," I said honestly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "But I wasn't here to sugarcoat anything. But now we fix it." He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "How?" I turned to face the entire neighborhood. "From now on, there will be no more ignored warnings. No more dismissed fears. No more hiding behind HOA politics. We will build a community where every kid is safe, every parent is heard, and every threat is taken seriously." A murmur of agreement swept through them. "And the HOA?" A voice called from the back. "It's over," I said. "Disbanded." Shocked whispers erupted, some relieved, some stunned. "We spoke with the city council," I continued. "Given the criminal investigation, the negligence, and the misconduct, the HOA board has been dissolved. New protocols will be implemented, new oversight, and every family will have a voice." Even the air seemed to shift, lighter, freer, as if the entire neighborhood had been holding its breath for years and finally exhaled. But justice wasn't complete yet. That afternoon, as the sun began to dip behind the rooftops, I drove to the county courthouse to witness the arraignment. Karen was brought in first, shackled, trembling, eyes empty with the hollow vacancy of someone whose mind had fallen into an abyss they couldn't crawl out of. Her lawyer whispered frantically to her, but she stared ahead blankly, like she was watching ghosts. Then Roger entered, angry, defensive, full of the arrogance he'd used to manipulate an entire community. And finally, Sarah, sobbing uncontrollably, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The judge sat tall, expression stern. "The charges," he began, "are as follows: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, coercion, destruction of evidence, and endangering minors." Gasps filled the courtroom. But it was the next line that made my heart pound. "Given the severity of these actions and the premeditated nature of the crimes, bail is denied." Roger's face twisted with disbelief. Karen stared at the floor. Sarah collapsed into her chair. Justice, real justice, finally began. But it didn't end there. Within days, news channels across the country aired the story. Interviews, headlines, public outrage, and letters, hundreds of them, poured into the station and my home from parents who'd faced similar HOA tyrants, from families victimized by neighborhood politics, from strangers who simply wanted to send love to Lila. The community rebuilt itself from ashes. Neighbors planted flowers in front of our house. Kids drew chalk hearts and wrote, "Get well soon, Lila," across the sidewalk where it all began. And as Lila finally came home to a street lined with banners and balloons, she smiled, small but genuine, for the first time since the shooting. I lifted her gently from the car, her head resting on my shoulder, and whispered, "You're home." She looked around at the crowd cheering for her and breathed, "It's beautiful." In that moment, the world steadied. The pain didn't disappear. The wound wasn't forgotten, and the nightmare would always leave a scar, but in its place, something stronger grew. Unity, safety, community, and a neighborhood reborn from the darkest truth. And as I held my daughter close, one thought echoed through me with absolute clarity: justice had been done. And no HOA, no tyrant, no manipulator would ever threaten my family or this community again. Before the story ends, I want to speak directly to you, the incredible person watching right now. If you made it this far, you didn't just watch a video. You felt this story. You lived every heartbeat, every twist, every moment of fear and justice right alongside this family. Now, I want to hear from you. Backhand index pointing right, which city are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments. I love seeing how far this community stretches across the country. Backhand index pointing, right? And tell me honestly, what would you have done if you were in the father's place? Your voice matters. Your stories matter. Let's build a community where every child is protected and every voice is heard. Yellow Heart, if the story pulled at your heart, hit like. It really helps more people see it. Bell, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more emotional, twist-filled, powerful stories just like this one. Your support means everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for standing with this family. And thank you for being part of a community that believes in justice, kindness, and protecting the innocent. Stay safe, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.